Hey guys, John Ruggles, Elevated Mission Channel. I'm here for another episode of the Ruggles Round Up. Well, Ian, I know you broadcast for a living in Minnesota with the Vikings and lifelong Lions fans. Both of us are. I used to work with the Vikings too, so we've got the teams that we made love, are out. Even I'm living here in Tampa, and even my Buccaneers are out. So, quite a shift. Some of those teams we thought might, show a little something here in the playoffs. But we got some great stories in the NFL this year, things that have never been seen before. It's pretty exciting stuff.
Absolutely. It was definitely a fun weekend of games, a very unexpected play that I thought leads to some really good, exciting matchups next week as well. And probably the most exciting of those games was that high scoring matchup between the Commanders and the Lions. That was a very surprise. It was your upset prediction of the week, which we were both very sad for your upset prediction become true.
Yeah.
But I think it was exactly what we thought was going to happen in a game like that, and that was Jaden Daniels taking over the game, being a special quarterback that we had seen throughout the season and in high-pressure situations, and him just taking advantage of bad mistakes that the Lions made with interceptions, fumbles, and them being able to score on those possessions to get a early lead and then never let that thing go, keeping those linebackers guessing with read option plays, them never able to drop back into true coverage, giving him really nice open wide receiver, one-on-one matchups with his wide receivers, and him be able to deliver with accuracy to those wideouts.
Yeah, I think Daniels is doing something unprecedented for a rookie quarterback. You mentioned in last week how he's a little older than most rookie quarterbacks, though, so that gives him a slight advantage. But still, first year in the NFL, super impressive stuff. I mean, by far, I think you have to say the greatest rookie quarterback of all time. Now, to get yourself to an NFC Championship game, that is super impressive stuff. Yeah, the Lions, they shot themselves in the foot way too many times. And here's the thing, even with shooting themselves in the foot like that so many times, against any other team in the playoffs during the divisional round, that offensive output would have won the game. But I think the injuries that had mounted on that defense showed their ugly head against the Commanders. It was basically you had to score every time you had the football. You couldn't, not score. And when you turn the ball over and you give pick sixes and you do those kind of things, you're just not going to win a playoff football game. I think the Lions are going to be back. Hey, surprise, we know now, that Ben Johnson is going to be with the Chicago Bears, so moves within division. That'll be fun, create a little bit of a rivalry, right there in the division with old coach and everything. I think there's a lot of love, though, between him and Campbell, and so I think it'll be fun to watch, see how that progresses.
It is kind of funny, though, that he's leaving for the Chicago Bears when just last offseason he said, I don't want to go take over being the head coach for the Washington Commanders because that's not the right situation for me, not a proper franchise. And now we see Jaden Daniels been the best rookie quarterback of maybe all time and took out the team he was being the offensive coordinator for and the team that he was like, this is the right situation. I don't want to go to this bad situation. And just, how scripts get flipped in the NFL so quickly. And now he's going over to the Bears, maybe to prove that the real best rookie in the class is still Caleb Williams. Just wasn't in the right offensive situation, but should be interesting. The NFC North should get more competitive with that move. Just shocked that we have none of those NFC North teams in the playoffs right now playing for
Yeah,
an
that's
NFC
amazing.
championship game.
After one of the greatest regular season divisional runs, right? I mean, every team but the Bears making the playoffs, and just a really tough division. and then all of them get knocked out very quickly. And so, yeah, we'll see what the NFC North looks like this next year. But I do think that adds a mix. I think this is good for the Bears that they got an offensive coordinator as a coach, because that's good for the development of Caleb Williams. They've got a nice crew on the offensive side of the ball there in Chicago. Now, what I don't like about that move is it's continuing for the Bears to hire coordinators that have never been a head coach before. That's what they've struggled with, but I do like that's on the offensive side of the ball. I would have liked to seen, someone with, head coaching experience walking into that building, just teaching them how to win as someone that's already done it at the head coach level. But I love the culture of the Detroit Lions, and I think he's going to probably bring that culture with him, or at least his version of that culture. And so that's a good thing. Hey, the Lions this year, I think for the first time in a long time, the only team that actually outdistanced the Dallas Cowboys in viewership during the season this year. Very popular. People love that grit attitude. They love Dan Campbell. He's must-see TV. And so if Ben Johnson, I know he's a different personality, but if he can bring some of that to Chi-Town, that'll be huge. It's obviously a huge market. And if he can get the Bears relevant again, the Bears, they're going to be able to bring a lot of people into the stadium, a lot of viewership, and that'll be something. I think the Cowboys, we're kind of going down a rabbit trail here, but I think the Cowboys have to make a big move on the coaching side of things to bring that back. Like, the Cowboys don't want to slip, right? They've been America's team for a long time. They don't want to slip as far as, in that ranking of who's getting viewership, of NFL teams. Even with not winning a championship since the 90s, they've kept that viewership just because people love the Dallas Cowboys. I think, they need to make a big move on the coaching side of things. We'll see where that falls. We don't know yet.
Yeah, the Cowboys' last playoff win was 2018, which feels like just yesterday, but that's actually some time from now at this point. And so they definitely need to get back into the winning things, and quickly, if they want to keep that viewership up for themselves, as they've just been a staple, good organization for so long. Well, let's get back on topic with the NFL playoffs, as we talked about what the Commanders did right to beat the Lions, and that was taking advantage of mistakes and just letting Jaden Daniels put a lot of pressure on that Lions defense and taking advantage of those holes. On the other side, it was Eagles-Rams, which what the Eagles did right was feed Saquon Barkley. 205 yards, two touchdowns. Just leaning on that dominant offensive line, that dominant run game that they have with Saquon Barkley just being so dangerous on every single play that he touches the ball. And then taking over that lead and relying on that defense to be able to slow down what is a very good offense in the Rams, which they did for quite some time in that game, until it felt like they just kept on whittling away at that lead that they had built up very early on, and getting into that fourth quarter, it ended up becoming a game.
Yeah, it did. And I'll tell you what, always, like you say, the right answer is to, yes, give the ball to Saquon. You talk a guy that just lingered in New York with the Giants for so long. I'm happy for Saquon to be on just a great functioning football team. You got a good offensive line, and Saquon's proven that you give him the right tools around him, and this is what he can do. And so, you got an uber talented defense there in Philadelphia. Now the Commanders are going to have to go to Philly. That's a tough venue to play in. And so, we'll see how that plays out. You keep on wondering, will the rookie, show up at the quarterback position in Washington at some point? I don't know. He seems like he's just poised. The moment's never too big. But, the Eagles, they just got so much talent. They got, they don't have the injuries that the Lions are dealing with. Yeah, I don't think that Jalen Hurts is playing his best football right now, but he's always a good leader. And you got Saquon to hand it off to. And if you need someone to dump it down to get the ball to, A.J. Brown is sure-handed. He's going to do stuff to get you that first down, and he'll just man up and make that happen. So, the Eagles are just looking really good as a whole team.
Absolutely. We did see last time the Washington Commanders and the Eagles play. Washington got the better of them.
Yeah, they did.
36-33 on a very heroic game by Jaden Daniels, 258 yards, 5 passing touchdowns. He also had 81 rushing yards in that game as well.
He's
He
a
is
machine.
so good, so hard to stop when he's playing at his best caliber, and it's going to be a tough game for that Eagles, but they are definitely, that was a game that they didn't have Jalen Hurts. It was Kenny Pickett at the helm, and so that definitely changes things. That leadership that Jalen Hurts brings them to a whole new level, and I think this defense is just revving in this playoffs as Jalen Carter. What a man. I don't remember a guy, it's probably been since Ndamukong Suh that we've seen a D tackle be able to just take off and be so dominant so early in his career. Just no hiccups as he got into the NFL. And these first 2 years have been just really, really good for him. And he just dominates that interior of the offensive line, making it so tough for quarterbacks, because it's tough when you get a pass rush from the outside, but when you're getting pressure in your face all the time from those D tackles, it gets even more chaotic. It gets a lot harder to stay calm in that pocket. Now, again, Jaden Daniels, we've been singing his praises all the time. That's one of the things he's the best at, is when pressure's in his face, he seems at peace. He seems so calm, even-keeled the entire time, and he's able to complete footballs with high accuracy, even with those guys in his face. But the Eagles are definitely going to bring that pressure into his face, even if they're having a 4-man rush out there. And then they got that great coverage on the back end that they put a lot of draft capital into, and you're seeing it reap rewards.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you and I were fans of Carter back when he was at Georgia, and coming into the draft, we talked a lot about him. He slipped a little bit in the draft because of some off the field stuff, but he's gotten to the right situation. A lot of adults in the room on the defensive side of the Philadelphia Eagles locker room, and so he's done great stuff since he's been there. Uber talented, and like you say, the worst thing for a quarterback is to get pressure in their face. That's what Aaron Donald made, a living on for so long. Such a disruptive force in the NFL. They do have a little bit of that with Fisk there in LA, and Verse coming off the edge, and that's a nice combination. But we can see it with the Eagles that it is in full force right now. And so, that's going to be different, I think, at a playoff level than it was in the earlier regular season matchup for the Commanders. But they're playing good football right now. The Commanders, you just got your hats off to Dan Quinn coming in. 4 wins last year. Now they're in the NFC Championship game. Dan Quinn did a nice job when he was in Atlanta as well. Then, obviously the DC in Dallas. But, I super impressed with what he has done there in Washington. And so, they've gotten some new ownership, a lot of new things in Washington. And it seems like they've turned that franchise that was kind of a train wreck just a couple of years ago, and really looking a lot different now today. So hats off there. Now, on the other side, we got an exciting matchup in the AFC.
Absolutely. I mean, what a game that was between the Ravens and the Bills. That was a fun matchup to watch, and I know it just leans into the Lamar Jackson can't compete in the playoffs narrative, but it was not on him. I mean,
He played really well, actually.
he had some big mistakes early on in the game. Early in the game, I was like, it's happening again. It's Lamar Jackson choking in the playoffs, but he really redeemed himself. The problem was that the Bills took advantage of those early mistakes and built a lead that was so hard for the Ravens to come back from, as they're just such a run-heavy team. They play great with a lead, the Ravens do, because they can just run the ball. They take off so much time on that clock when they're running that football that they have to go away from their bread and butter. They had to go and pass the ball. And we're trying to get guys going with pretty much no wide receivers and just straight up tight end play. Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews was their only threats all game long. And they got a lot of things going there. But when you have those guys running so much, they're running verticals with their tight ends. They're going to get gassed. And by the end of that game, you saw that exhaustion come to a head as you watch Mark Andrews drop an easy 2-point conversion pass right to him, and they miss out on tying the game and sending that thing into overtime. But I got to give props to the Bills for just taking advantage of the situations that were given to them. When there was a mistake done by the Baltimore, they took advantage of it, and they were able to build a lead. It's what the Patriots made a living off of for 20 years, was living off the mistakes of the other team, not necessarily making these grand plays that took them, just blew the other team out of the water. They just, when you threw an interception, they were going to drive down on that short field and score a touchdown. They were going to put points on the board because of that interception, and they won a lot of Super Bowls doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing is, we love and we praise Lamar Jackson all season long. He gets the MVP votes. He does all these great things. He really does. And then we say that, well, the narratives, he doesn't get it done in the playoffs. And the thing is he would be the hero if Mark Andrews catches that easy catch. They go into overtime, and then Derrick Henry, runs a run into the end zone, and they win the game, right? And then it would be Lamar Jackson exercises, all of his demons, and you're like, well, that's the same game minus 2 plays that other people have to perform.
Uncontrollable too.
Exactly.
To Lamar Jackson.
Exactly. Mark Andrews, in 2 key moments, had his own mistakes. And those are 2 guys, right? Lamar early on had a couple of mistakes. It's just in playoff football that can cost you. But that didn't cost him the game necessarily. And then Mark Andrews, again, maybe those 2 mistakes didn't fully cost him the game, right? But they were in key moments, and he is their guy, right? I mean, that's the who is Lamar going to get the ball to in those clutch moments? It could be Mark Andrews. He's just done it for years. The 2 of them have a great connection. One time, again, instead of getting north and south, right, he goes vertical. I mean, instead of going vertical, he goes horizontal, right, and then gets the ball knocked out of his hand. That's a key moment where you just don't expect him to run that way, and then dropping that easy catch there. But you know what? Sometimes those easy, backyard, just dump it off throws is where quarterbacks mess up, or where the receiver or the tight end mess up, because it's so easy. You got time to think about it. When it's, you talk about this is getting off topic slightly, but tight end catches. Did you see the Laporta catch in the Lions game? That one-handed snag diving across the back of the end zone. One of the all-time great tight end catches, in a losing effort. But still, those sometimes in actual play are easier in that, like, you don't have time to think. Your body just reacts to the training, to the effort that you've been putting in. And then sometimes on those easy things like Mark Andrews, you just are thinking so much about the moment is so big.
And it was in such a weird spot too, even though we call it an easy catch, that right at the belt buckle throw, you don't know, or do you put your hands down? Do you keep your hands in the diamond? What are you doing with it? And you start, and especially when it's an easy pitch and catch like that, you start thinking about it in a clutch moment, and you see it ends up being a drop in that exact moment. Now, a little coach question: if you were the head coach of the Ravens, and I know that call was probably the right call looking at it and they were wide open, but you got a 6'4", 250-pound man that can bulldoze his way for quite a few yards. Are you giving it to Derrick Henry in that moment, saying, this is our best option. He's our best player. He's only had 16 carries this game. He should be revving to get downhill and run it. It's kind of the Marshawn Lynch question on that Super Bowl issue. Not as, I guess, drastic as that one, because that cost him the Super Bowl.
Yeah. It cost you a chance at the Super Bowl, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So do you hand it off to Derrick Henry in that moment?
I think you do. Here's the reason why. It's not because that wasn't the right call or that wasn't a good play. I got no problems with the call by John Harbaugh. It's a good call. It all worked right. He just drops the football, right? But I think on the plane ride home, everything about that, as you're playing golf today, thinking about your season, right? If you handed it off to Derrick Henry, you're like, you gave it to Derrick Henry, just couldn't get it, right? I mean, we can get better, we can do whatever. Today you're going, man, should I have damn, throw that, he dropped the ball. Like, you know, I'm saying, like, there's all these questions. It doesn't make the call wrong. It's just now you live with all these questions. Whereas if it goes wrong and you hand it off to Derrick Henry, you just go, well, I gave it to our 250-pound running back, and he couldn't get 2 yards. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just, like that you just don't have the questions, in those key moments at that point. Were you able to man up? Were you able to just go get those yards and be able to tie the ball game up so you could go into overtime and possibly get a win? And I think that's why you do it. So that's my take. What do you think? E?
It's one that I question a lot as well, because probably because I like to think that you're a little bit more manalytic and I'm a little bit more analytic when I talk about what I would choose
Yeah.
on my play. And I think the analytics tell you to run the play action fake and throw the quick out, get Lamar Jackson rolling out to the outside, give him an option to either take off with it and get to the pylon, or toss it over to. I think you just get more options with that play, a more opportunity to get the 2-point conversion. Where I guess like you said, you don't question maybe the call nearly as much because you do that. But I mean, you're putting it in the hands of the MVP. Most likely MVP, back-to-back MVP, Lamar Jackson, and he makes the right play, and it just
He
ends
did.
up
He
being
did.
a
He
draw.
did everything he was supposed to do. Though, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and so I go they made the right call. It just, maybe I think earlier in the game I would have, I don't know what you do, because I just wouldn't have maybe had my tight ends running so many verticals, just going out there playing like wide receivers so much, because those guys had to be gassed, having to block all those plays and then having to go out there and be receiver type players running deep balls. They just never got a break throughout any of that offense. And so that's where I have the issue with it. But yeah, I say they make the right play, but I have no idea. I do love to just hand it off to Derrick Henry call as well. But we know we're talking a lot about the losing team. The winning team, they just did a lot of things right. They didn't do a lot of things to win the game. You talk about Josh Allen, only 207 yards passing, didn't have to do a lot, but high completion rate at 16 for 22 passing, just dinked and dunked his way down the field. James Cook, 17 carries for 67 yards, nothing impressive, but when they got in the red zone, they were able to use the dual threat ability of Josh Allen, which makes him so special, able to get two touchdowns in the red zone on those very short carries. And they were able to do a lot of really good stuff there and win them the game, playing good, mistake-free football, which is what got them there.
Yeah, that was the theme. I feel like that was the theme of this last weekend in the NFL was the team that made the less amount of mistakes won the football game. Like that was how you got the win. It wasn't who was the better offense, who was the better defense. Those things obviously factor in, but it was just not making mistakes, which is an old mantra in the NFL, right? I mean that, the team with the less turnovers, the team that, gets the job done, even if the job is just take care of the football, you know what I mean? And you get the win.
Yeah,
So
and that's actually a perfect segue into our other topic, which is not making mistakes, maybe throwing interceptions or having fumbles, but making mistakes in penalties, whether you agree with those penalties or not agree with those penalties. In key situations, the Houston Texans committed penalties that just gave the Kansas City Chiefs scoring opportunities that they just couldn't give a team that is just so dominant on the offensive end. They would have them on 3 and outs, and then you'd see just something that was just, it's so frustrating to watch. It was a really frustrating game for us as fans, just because you watch it, what felt like a lopsided reffing affair. And I'm one that usually defends, especially the people who have said throughout the season that Kansas City gets all the calls and everything like that. And I'm like, no, they don't. It's not that way. This game made me almost flip that opinion, because
yeah,
there was just multiple times where the Will Anderson roughing the passer because of head contact that wasn't there, just really was aggravating, and then getting called when he slid and the two guys collide with each other over top of Patrick Mahomes, but really make no contact with Patrick Mahomes, and they
Right.
call another penalty on that, giving them a easy first down, and it just felt a little ridiculous. You saw even at times where this was the one that just made me just mad at the Chiefs, because I'm not one that's like, oh, anti-Chiefs. I actually
Right.
love what Andy Reid does with his system. Watching Patrick Mahomes slow down before he goes out of bounds and trying to draw penalty, I was like, okay, we're not in the NBA. We don't flop in the NFL. That's part of the beauty of the NFL, is we're a rough, tough sport. And so I just got frustrated with that game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think here's the challenge is that it feels like that the NFL refs have taken on the mantra of the old like boxing mantra, where is you got to knock out the champ. You can't just beat him on technicalities. You got to knock out the champ. And so this is going to be the narrative that the Bills are going to have to face if that is true. If our eyes aren't lying to us for the last couple of years, that, you know what? It's not egregious, but there's favorable calls that are going to go the Kansas City Chiefs' way. So, Bills, if you want to make a Super Bowl, you're going to have to overcome even those calls. You know what I'm saying? And here's what I give them credit for is they've been playing that kind of football lately. Bills take care of their business. They do the right things. And so don't even be near it. You know what I mean? Don't,
Absolutely.
yeah, just stay so far away from the penalties that they can't call it on you. You know what I mean? And that's how
And
they're going to
guard
play
Travis
football.
Kelsey. And guard
Yeah.
Travis Kelsey. That's
Yeah.
the other thing, because watching Travis Kelsey just run wide open at times against that Houston defense, I was like, what film were you watching? Their only weapon is Travis Kelsey. He had 117 of Patrick Mahomes' 177 passing yards, and so he's just running wide open. I know he's one of the hardest guard tight ends, and he's just one of the best, especially coming off a bye week. That helps a older player like Travis Kelsey be able to have fresh legs to go out there and do work. But you're gonna have to stop that connection between Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey. Force them to find other people to beat you, because that's going to be what is you have to do to be able to win that game against the Chiefs, which are just, that connection is so dominant, and they'll put up 20 plus points on you every single game if you aren't able to guard Travis Kelsey and let them just dink and dunk all the way down the field and get those just over the middle little crossers for 10 yards every single time they need a first down. So that's
Travis Kelsey, go ahead.
that was just what I was gonna. I'll leave it at that.
Travis Kelsey, I was just thinking another boxing analogy. He's kind of rope a dope in the NFL these days. 2 seasons in a row. During the regular season, you're like, I don't know. Has he lost a step? What's he doing? And then playoff Kelsey shows up. You got to be prepared for it. I don't think he's going to take the Bills by surprise. They're going to be ready for a full Kelsey game that he is going to play like Kelsey of old, and that they're going to have to really do some things to stop him, slow him up, because if you let him run free, you let Patrick Mahomes, the best that we've probably ever seen, do it out there, then they're going to beat you. And especially if they're getting some calls too, I mean, that's just a hard combination to stop. And so you're going to have to play your best game. Josh Allen, you want to be considered as one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, then you know what? Go play mistake-free football, take care of the ball. We know you got a nice running game right now with Cook. Go out there and take care of your business. You got a solid defense. And you know what, guys? Just at least contain that offense. Make them have to drive. Make them, have to do the things they want to do. And then, offense, you're going to have to score when you get out there. So, well, that's been fun. Recap, talking all this. What's that? I think it's prediction time. So. Yeah, where we going? AFC, NFC first. Where we going?
Okay. You know what? I'm just gonna do both mine out here, right here,
Let's
right
do it.
now. And I just want the craziest fandom matchup of all time, and that would be the Eagles winning against the Commanders. I think that's a pretty easy prediction in my opinion. Commanders have one of the worst run defenses in the entire NFL. Unless the Eagles let them get an early lead, the Eagles should be able to dominate with Saquon Barkley, take control of the clock, and with that defense that is much better than what we saw with the Lions, should be able to at least contain a little bit of what Jaden Daniels can do and keep that to a relatively, I think it'll still be a decently close game, but I do think that the Eagles will be able to just hold on to a lead I don't think they'll give up a lead once they take it, maybe in the first or second quarter, and they'll be able to just dominate throughout that matchup. And then on the other side, I want the Bills. I just am rooting for the Bills. I think Josh Allen has been one of the most just a guy that wins you football games, in my opinion. He doesn't necessarily have the craziest stats in the NFL of all the quarterbacks. As you look at the passing side of things, you see Joe Burrow. You see the rushing side of things, you see Lamar Jackson. You see just these other guys that have put up these really impressive numbers. But Josh Allen just wins you football games, whether it's getting you a tough first down by lowering his shoulder to get an extra 4 yards to continue the drive, whether it is chucking it 60 yards down the field to a wide receiver on the money. I think he's going to be able to do a lot of those things. I think it's going to be putting a lot of pressure on that Chiefs defense to be able to contain everything that he can do, and I think that's going to be he's going to be able to carry them to the promised land and bring them to a fun Super Bowl matchup with crazy fans, a bunch of folding tables, beware, as we see Bills Eagles play in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I love those picks. I'll tell you what, yeah, it's hard to not pick the Eagles, on that side of the ball. But here's the deal. The Lions averaged I don't know what it was, like 9-10 yards a rush against them and still lost. I don't know, again, if you can force some turnovers, if you could make, them make some bad decisions, Jalen Hurts has an off games, turns the ball over, those kind of things. That's the pathway, I think, for the Commanders to win.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. If they can get that, that's the way the Commanders are going to win. Basically, the formula that they used against the Lions, other than the Lions just have beat up defense, but is the formula to beat really anybody. That's how the Commanders are going to win. So I'll go, just craziest pick of all time, rookie quarterback in the Super Bowl. So we'll go Commanders. I gotta pick the other side. So gonna go with that. And that would be fun as well to see Washington back in the Super Bowl. I mean, how crazy would that be? And then you get a matchup. So probably the guy that's been the best. Every year he started, he's ended up in the AFC Championship game or better, okay? And Patrick Mahomes over with the Chiefs, and then you have him going with the guy that probably had the greatest rookie quarterback season of all time. So we'll just have those two face off in the Super Bowl. And and see what happens. Chiefs versus the Commanders, and that would be a super fun matchup. Hey, before we go off air here, though, real quick, your take about the college playoff. We got Ohio State National Championship. We thought that the coaching staff in Ohio State was on the firing block after losing to Michigan. The total redemption story: win the national championship. First year of this new playoff system. What's your take on the college playoffs?
Okay, just quick as quick fan talk right here. How about the boys in blue being better than the national champions?
They beat Alabama and Ohio State, so
I think it's the only team in the 2000s to be not ranked and then beat back-to-back ranked teams, beating Ohio State and Alabama in back-to-back games. So very impressive stuff by Michigan to end the year off. But that's just me hating.
Then get the number
State.
one recruit. Yeah, in the
Absolutely.
recruiting.
They're looking good.
Yeah.
They're looking good. I'm excited for this offseason. But that's
Good
just
off
me
you.
hating on Ohio State. Ohio State had a fantastic end to the season, and what they could do with the run game with Quinshon Judkins was just so dynamic. I mean, 11 carries for 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. He just felt like he couldn't be stopped. That offensive line was opening up gaping holes for that team that was going up against a defense that had limited a lot of really power offenses, especially some really powerful rushing attacks. When you see what they did to Penn State, they were not able to do that same thing to the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I think a lot of that.
I don't know if you're going to come back, E. You froze up on me here. Hey, E?
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now.
Okay. Okay.
You cut off after you said Penn State.
Yes. Okay. So after you saw what that defense was able to do to Penn State in limiting the rushing attack for them, I thought maybe we were going to see them be able to limit the rushing attack for Ohio State, but that wasn't the case. Quinshon Judkins was just so dynamic in that matchup, and then I think a lot of that had to do with the way that they had to play their defense and change up the way they had to cover teams differently than how they had to cover teams all season long because of just the deep threat of what Jeremiah Smith is and what all those receiving weapons are, but in particular Jeremiah Smith, who still got it going with 5 receptions, 88 yards, and 1 touchdown. I mean, just such a dynamic player, probably the best freshman in the entire college football landscape, and maybe the best wide receiver in all of college football. Actually, I'm just going to say he is the best wide receiver in college football, Jeremiah Smith, and he's
Yeah.
only a freshman. And he changes the landscape of a football game because he is so good, just exploding off the line of scrimmage, making it tough for guys to be able to cover. Guys will flip their hips early, and he'll still make you think, man, you should have flipped your hips a little bit earlier on that one because he is so fast. I think he could go be a Big Ten winner in the 100-yard dash if he decided to go run track. That's how fast this guy is, and he was able to take the top off of that defense, and then they could run it up the middle, and they couldn't really do much. They didn't have an answer for that offense that was able to dominate all day long, get an early lead, forcing them to get uncomfortable and pass it with Riley Leonard, who actually had one of his best games of the entire season, throwing for 255 yards and 2 touchdowns, even had a rushing touchdown as well, but just wasn't enough to be able to stop just such a good offense.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I'll tell you what, I hope that they make some small adjustments. I love the playoff system, but I'd like to see the playoffs to end on January 1st. Don't go compete with the NFL playoffs, going this deep into into the new year, and, so lessen some games on the regular season, get this playoffs going, and I'd love home field advantage up until the championship game. I think it would be great to have that championship game on January 1st. You can make it one of the major bowls, probably the Rose Bowls. That's the granddaddy of them all. But but yeah, I think it's got to wrap up earlier than that. I heard this through Joe Platt, but I agree with it completely, and I think then we've got a spectacular format for the college football moving forward. But it's still exciting. I guess Ohio State gets it. The first time they moved to the playoff system before this, Ohio State wins the national championship. They moved to a new playoff system. Ohio State wins the national championship. Hats off to those guys. They play good football. And exciting year. And I'm excited about this NFL as it wraps up. The NFL playoffs have been super great so far. And looking forward to some great championship games and then on to the Super Bowl. So we'll be back with you guys next week. If you have not subscribed, make sure you mash that subscribe button and just make sure you're getting all the updates, all the videos that we're putting out. And we'll be talking to you guys again next week.